Well, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to live up to you spending your valuable time with us here today. And I have no doubt you'll be glad you came. We're going to be talking today with Richard Ramos about negotiating as parents on a mission to save our kids. So, welcome, Richard. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Cindy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I think it's an important one and one we don't talk enough about. And for those of you who don't know Richard, he's the author and founder of Parents on a Mission. He founded the Latino Coalition for Community Leadership, granted I think over $105 million in grants to like 220 grassroots nonprofits across the United States. He's been recognized with good reason by the White House administration, by US Congress, California State Assembly, and many, many more, because of his decades of community service and human rights work. So obviously I haven't done a lot of human rights advocacy myself. I thought I got to get him in here to share his love and his message with our audience. So first, why don't you tell us, Richard, what is Parents on a Mission?
Parents on a Mission is a leadership program, really. Essentially, that's the heart of it. I came up with this years ago. I was an at-risk counselor at a junior high school, and I had a caseload of 50 kids, and they were doing all the things we don't want kids
Yeah.
doing, gangs,
Yeah.
drugs, dropping out of school,
Yeah.
etc. At that time, I was a young parent myself, and I realized I can't just believe everything these kids are telling me.
Yeah.
And I decided to go to their homes.
Yeah.
And when I went there and I saw all the lack of communication, lack of respect, dysfunction, I realized I was fighting a losing battle. And that if I really wanted to help the students on my caseload, I needed to work with mom and dad. So
Yeah.
at that point, I decided I'm going to stop being a youth mentor and start being a parent mentor. And then I developed a curriculum. And what it is teaching really, I like to say this, the difference between Parents on a Mission and most parenting classes is that most parenting classes teach parents to focus on and fix their kids. Parents on a Mission is about looking at ourselves
I
and
love it.
fixing mom and dad first. And
Yeah.
then from there, that leadership of, looking within and then being the
Yeah.
best version of ourselves for our kids.
Oh, I think that's brilliant and so important because I know even within my circles, like I look at, as parenting three kids, we started late and made up for lost time, had three kids in 3 years, Richard. But,
Oh,
even the most well-intentioned parents often make really serious mistakes. We have the helicopter parenting, the snowplow parenting, and then you've got the sort of absent parenting approach. I mean, across the spectrum, however well-intentioned you are. So I love that focus. And so let's sort of roll up our sleeves and dig in, because I think it's fair to say, and for our listeners out there, parenting is hard work. I think that's always
hard
been
work.
the case. But I think the demands of today's sort of fast changing world, and with social media and the technology growth, and I know
Right.
that you share my view that negotiating strong relationships with our kids is key. So tell us, why is it so important to do this growth work?
I say, to me, it's a myth when they say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And I say, no, it does not take a myth. It takes just good parenting, because the village that I grew up in, that's not the village we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a bombardment of ideology from all over the place, whether it's
Yeah.
from music or movies or media, social media especially. And the truth is, and this, I run into this all the time, young people are being more lured away from their parents and the authority of parents
Yeah.
versus being supported to listen to your parents.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I just think it's very important for mom and dad to practice the skills of emotional intelligence and those kinds of things. Like you call it, the negotiation is
Yeah.
so important. I really like your perspective on that. I looked at that. I think it's the 5 Ws.
Oh, nice. Look at you doing your homework.
Yeah, I really like that perspective, because the first one you talk about is the why. Know your why.
Yeah.
And so, why do I, as a dad, why is it important for me to know me?
Yeah.
And so that's where it starts. That's the first principle we talk about, is to know yourself, to grow yourself. And I've found that so many parents, for whatever reason it is, somewhere, I don't know, I don't have scientific, this is just my
Yeah.
observation. Somewhere between 25 and 30 years old, we just stop growing. I call it flatlining.
Yeah.
In order to, we all know, we all grow old automatically. I didn't always have gray hair, and I had a lot more hair, and I
I
didn't
hear
have a
you.
gray beard. Without trying, I just lost hair and got gray.
Yeah.
But growing up, that takes work.
Yeah.
And that's what emotional maturity is all about.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely want to dig deeper on that. And, it's funny. I call it a negotiation, and people often balk at me. But I think for me, just reframing negotiation, it's about being more intentional, right? Like, who do I
Yes.
want to show up as? If I'm going to have this difficult conversation with my kid, I don't want to wait until I blow up at them and have I want to be really intentional about where should I have this conversation? When's the best timing for this? Who do I want to be, right? What are the fears that
Right.
they're bringing to the table? All of those things. So, and
Right.
I want to go back to a point when you said about like our entertainment industry, because I think people think I'm just getting old and crusty, but I think back to the kind of modeling we had in the entertainment we watched in my generation growing up, where, the good guy always won and your word was your bond and there was a certain amount of respect. And when I look now, I'd say over the last decade or maybe even more, almost all the hit TV shows, the so-called protagonists are actually the bad guys, whether it's The Sopranos or Breaking Bad or Ray Donovan, we're rooting for the bad guys. So what's been your observation about that, if any, in terms of that impact?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I would say that, this stuff has been going on for a long time. So I would say it's the same in kind, but it's a much different degree.
Yeah,
It's much more in our face. It's, coming from the school, whether it's politics, whether it's the church house, the White House, or the schoolhouse.
yeah, that's good.
Honestly, we just don't know who to trust anymore.
Yeah,
There's been so many, I'm talking about the United States. There's
yeah,
been so many scandals and so many litigation and so much going on. Who do you trust? And
yeah,
all these other ugly things. So I think a lot of it is from the media, the music, the lyrics in the music, the shows on TV, the
yeah,
movies, all those things. And so what I say to parents, but the thing is, we can't escape it.
yeah,
There's no escape. All of us are being bombarded all the time. So what's the answer? And instead of focusing on trying to remove all these things, which is impossible, I tell mom and dad, but you can inoculate your children. You can inoculate them and make them immune, so to speak, to all the toxins that are out there. And what that analogy is,
yeah,
it's integrity. When
yeah,
you're inoculating your children with integrity and your values and role modeling and all the different things that go on in your home, while you're sending your kids out to all those things that are out there, because we cannot hide from it,
yeah.
but at least you put something in them that's going to help navigate through all those environmental toxins
Yeah.
that are out there.
Inoculating with integrity. I love that. That's fantastic. You should trademark that if you haven't. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
No,
it's in my book and in my curriculum.
nice. At least you got it copyrighted then.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
we hear a lot of different and conflicting information about, what are the critical years for children in terms of development or being at risk. And, for all, some people say it's up until the time they're 2. Some people say it's at 12 to 17. What are your views on that? Is there a sort of a critical time that it's most important, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the research shows that when children reach the age between 12 to 15, those are the critical years. And
Okay.
so what I developed was a strategy for parents. I call it the home field advantage. So at first, when parents would ask me, Richard, I don't want my little kids, what you're doing with my teenager is great, but he's already messing up. I don't want his brother to
Yeah.
become like him. What do I do? And at that time, I didn't have an answer. But
Yeah.
I really thought about it and thought about it, and I did that research. And when I saw that from 12 to 15, I said, oh, okay, that tells me that parents, we have a 12-year, what I call home field advantage from the
Yeah.
time a child is born until that time of 12. They're mostly with us.
Yeah.
So I break it up into 3 time frames. 0 to 2, what should be happening in a child's life? I call it the parent as a gardener or nurturer.
Hmm.
Then what should be happening in the life of a child from 2 to 5? I call it the time now you're training your child because, terrible twos, etc.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial, as you know, crucial time from
Yeah.
2 to 5. And so now you're disciplining them, you're showing them, no, you're not in charge. I am, all of those
Yeah.
things. And then from 5 to 12, now they're out in the world. They're in school most of the time.
Yeah.
And so I call that the role of a coach. So going from nurturer to trainer to coach. And
Nice.
I call that the home field advantage. And if you play our roles correctly, and nobody gets it right all the time, I understand that. But if we are intentionally doing those roles,
Yeah.
then we have a pretty good chance that our children are going to develop well. They're going to be socially good citizens, I should say.
Yeah.
And that's what I teach. Is I call it the home field advantage from
Yeah.
0 to 12.
Yeah. I love this. And I love how it's broken down in structure. I think it makes it easy for people to follow and to understand and to be able to actually apply, right? As opposed to some of these books that you read, they're just sort of all over the place. And it's tough to really get a bead on a line about, okay, how do I apply this? And speaking of applying it, what are some tips you would have for us on how to start building that relationship so that you I think you talk about sort of winning the hearts and minds and loyalty of your kids. What are some tips on how to build that?
It starts with the why, as you
Yeah.
you say too. It starts with the why. Why do I need to know me? If I'm going to negotiate my kids because my authority, the principles I teach are 6 principles: authority, proper use of authority, proper use of discipline, reconciliation, being a citizen, and then loyalty. So if I want to my child to respect my authority, I have to know me. If
Yeah.
I want to exercise the proper use of authority, I need to know, why is that important? And then the what? What do I want from my children? So ultimately, what I want respect for my authority. I want to exercise discipline that my child will respond to.
Yeah.
I want to know how to, then you talk about the when, and the when reconciliation. When is the best time to, have that hard conversation? Because reconciliation is an important part of family. So those types of principles, if we as parents can exercise those types of things, too many parents abdicate their role as an authority figure.
Yeah. That's so
So to
true.
get back to your question, number one, I got to know me so I can be the best version of myself, and I'm
Yeah.
always working on myself.
Yeah.
Secondly, I want to exercise my authority and not give it away to the pastor, the priest, the coach, the teacher, the counselor, grandma, uncle, which a
Yeah.
lot of parents do all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That's
As
true.
far as discipline, a controversial issue, but if we learn, and I talk about this at length in the book, what is the proper use of discipline?
Yeah.
And too many parents, discipline is not punishment.
Yeah.
Punishment doesn't care about outcomes. Punishment is more about, hey, you did wrong, here's your punishment. Discipline is about teaching. That's the word disciplinare in Latin. It means to teach.
Hmm.
And so the teachable moments when kids fail, so the proper use of discipline, then reconciliation. Families have problems.
Yeah.
That's not unusual, and that's nothing to fear. The key is, what do we do
Yeah.
when we've had problems? And so that's the skill of reconciliation,
Yeah.
learning how do you call it negotiation. It's really the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do we go about reconciling? And that's where that negotiation comes in, where you got to know, who am I? How do I want to show
Yeah.
up? What's the best time?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. What do I want?
Yeah.
And then the community building, I called it, it's really citizenship. The community doesn't build your family. Your family is built in the community. Where do
Mm.
the citizens come from?
Nice. Yeah.
Citizens go to school. They don't come from school. They go to church. They don't come from church. They go to work. They don't come from work. Citizens come from our home. And
Yeah.
therefore, here's the question, mom and dad. What kind of citizen are we sending into the community every day? What
Yeah.
kind of citizen goes to our neighborhood, to our school, out in the community? What kind of citizen goes to work that
Yeah.
we developed in our home? So those are the principles that we teach. The last one is how to win loyalty. And if we can practice those things, that's what the whole book is about,
Yeah.
give practical tips on, okay, Richard, how do I grow myself? How
Yeah.
do I use authority? How do I use discipline, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I love it. And I love how careful you are with language as well, because I think language matters. And,
Yeah.
that's why I use certain words intentionally that I know are going to get some pushback, including negotiation, frankly, or when I call it the art of feminine negotiation. It's about reframing some of this stuff so that let's not see this as a liability anymore. Let's see this as an advantage. And I want to circle back because you mentioned reconciliation a couple of times. And I know reconciliation and sort of restorative justice are really much more talked about these days as negotiation models. I'd love you to just go give us a little bit on how we apply that to our parenting.
Yeah. Well, again, this is where our humility comes in. Having the humility to, first of all, maybe am I part of the problem?
Yeah.
Maybe, you know what, I need to look at myself and
Yeah.
think, okay, am I contributing to what's going on here. We had a falling out. Maybe we had an argument. You know, I've gone through this more than I'd like to admit. By
Yeah.
the way, my wife and I are a blended family. We have 8 children,
Oh my
and
God.
I have 11 grandchildren and one great grandchild. So we have experience.
You got
And
some hands
you
on.
know, I've learned from my failures. So one of those is, losing my temper,
Yeah.
speaking too soon, getting upset, lashing out. So sometimes a lot of parents don't want to recognize that, you know what, that deserves an apology. That deserves an acknowledgement. So
Yeah.
reconciliation, it takes a lot of humility, and also takes the ability to forgive and to
Yeah.
let things go, because we do get offended, but we can forgive. So it's a whole art in itself. And I normally tell the story of, and I won't tell the whole story here, but just to get back to your question,
Yeah.
a lot of people know the story of the prodigal son. But I say that whoever called it the prodigal son got it wrong. That's not what that story is about.
Yeah.
That story is about a great father.
I love that.
It starts out saying a certain man had 2 sons.
Yeah.
It's about the certain man and his whole response to not only when his son asked for his inheritance and went out and pigged it and drank it and drugged it, but when he came to himself and said, "What am I doing? I'm eating with the pigs. I can go home." How many kids right now, even out there, could say when they come to that hard place, I can go home?
Yeah.
And the reason he said that was because he knew the kind of man his father was.
Yeah.
That's what that story is all about. The
Mhm.
pre-forgiveness, obviously, he had already
Yeah.
forgiven him. And so I could go on, but
Oh,
those
I
are
love
some
it.
of the things, the humility, the forgiveness, the willing to look at yourself and maybe, I need to grow up a little bit more,
Yeah.
things like that. Reaction versus response,
Yeah.
all of those skills.
Oh, and humility. Gosh, I love, you don't hear that word very often in this context or any context of negotiation. And I think you just really hit on such a key point there, frankly. It's surrendering our ego, right? When we, and being, and I think you said speaking too soon. Again, I'm like, oh my gosh, how many negotiations, whether with our intimate partner, with our kids, or even in business negotiations, we've been so
That's right.
conditioned to think we need to be talking over people. We need, and in our parenting, we need to be the one laying down the, and sometimes it's all about listening and finding out about what are their fears? What is it they want, right? Where are the concerns, and just give them the
Yeah.
space so that we know what's happening. Now, what are some of the
Right.
key mistakes that you see parents make?
Well, the one I already mentioned is not understanding that you are the most important person in
Yeah,
the community. It's not the policeman, it's not the
yeah,
principal, it's not the pastor, it's not the priest. You, mom and dad, you're the number one asset in the life of your child. And
yeah,
you should really believe that and know that and not give away that role. And then the authority, abdicating your role of authority, throwing up your hands and I don't know what to do. So,
yes.
just kind of my one of my sons is a high school coach, and he tells me this all the time. Dad, sometimes parents call me and they say, "Can you talk to my son? He's not doing his homework." And he says to them, being raised by me, he knows better than that. He says, "No, I'm not going to do that. That's your job. You need to talk to him. I'll coach him.
Yeah,
You talk to him about that." So
nice.
that's one of the mistakes.
Yeah,
Another one I think it also is taking for granted the loyalty of their children.
yeah,
This is a huge
uh,
topic, as you know,
yeah.
in my book, I talk about that. It's one of my main theme. But I say to parents, you need to understand you are in a daily, I say competition. Other people have told me, Richard, it's not a competition, it's a war. It's a battle. It's the enemy out there. But don't take your child's loyalty for granted, because really the
Nice.
question I always ask parents, rhetorical, who is going to win the loyalty of your daughter, her
Yeah,
heart, her mind? Because if you're not understanding that that's what all this is about, all
yeah,
this recruiting that's going on the internet, the messages
yeah,
and the music and the movies, etc. That's what's happening, and luring them away from your values and saying, you know what, keep secrets from mom and dad. We don't
yeah,
need to tell them what we're really doing.
yeah,
So taking for granted the loyalty of our children is another, I think, huge mistake. And then the last one, oh, there's many, but
yeah,
another one I would say is just the communication. we live in, I call it the heads down generation.
Yeah.
Everybody at the dinner table, a line in the airport, at school, walking down the street. I mean, everybody has got their head looking
That's
at their
true.
phone.
Yeah.
And at the dinner table, mom and dad, let's not have that. No text, no email, no,
Yeah.
none of that. Let's communicate, have that eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
Let's put everything away, turn the TV off, turn the radio off, etc.
Yeah.
And let's just have a family or dad son or mom son
Yeah.
or dad daughter discussion. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes as parents, we take those things for granted. And those are simple principle values that if we practice them, we're going to reap the results.
Oh, that was a much deeper answer than I expected, like in the best possible way. Like I think normally when you talk about, oh, what are negotiating mistakes people make, you get kind of flippant ones. Those were really not often talked about. And boy, do they go to the heart of the matter. Love those, Richard. Now you've talked about growth a few times. And, I often say that negotiating our mindset is our first and most important negotiation. So I'd love if you could talk to us, what are some of the steps that parents can take to grow themselves? And I know you've talked about a bit, but just to kind of crystallize that for our listeners out there so that they can approach their parenting with a stronger mindset.
Yeah, the four steps we take now, of course, if you want to know more about this, first of all, if you don't have Cindy's, what is it called, Cindy? The five
The
W's
five
of
W model, yeah.
if you don't have that, you need to get that because that's
Well,
a
thank
great
you.
resource. No, it really is. I really love that. I,
Thanks.
I, I really got a lot out of reading that. But anyway, so the first one is we teach four steps, four basic steps, because I got to think of my audience. Keep it basic. Number one, I already said is know yourself. The
Yeah,
second one is know the power of your thoughts.
yeah,
You call it mindset, the
yeah,
power of your thinking, the power of your mind. Why? Because our thoughts lead to third, our choices.
yeah,
So know myself, know the power of my thoughts, know the power of my choices because I have responsibility. I can choose my response. I can choose how I want to feel about things. I can choose how I want to think about things. I have this power to choose. So
yeah,
those are, if we can work on those three things, and then the last one I already mentioned is forgiveness.
yeah,
I believe those are four basic steps of how a parent can grow in their I call it emotional maturity.
yeah,
Other people call it emotional intelligence, but just understanding the power of our thinking, the power of our choices that we make based on our thoughts
yeah,
and how to control. We teach how do you control your thoughts. We talk about that so that therefore now instead of reacting to
yeah,
things, which, I'm guilty of as
yeah,
well, we can respond
yeah,
because reaction for survival is good. Reaction in relationships is usually not good.
yeah,
It requires that space between stimulus and then I can think about reason and then say, okay,
yeah,
I'm going to respond to this. And
yeah,
then forgiveness. Unfortunately, Cindy, I was counselor for many years. A lot of parents hang on to things. We
yeah,
talk about young people hang on to stuff too, but a lot of times as
yeah,
adults, as
yeah,
parents,
yeah,
they hang on to things, and that really hinders
yeah,
parent-child
yeah.
relationships.
What a powerful paradigm. I mean, I think those four steps that you talked about, game changer, absolute game changer in terms of your personal growth, your ability to interact with all of your loved ones, obviously, including in our parenting, but so far beyond that, right? Our entire experience of life and interactions with other people, being able to nail that. I think about the times with my kids when they've been, in a risky place. And at first I, showed up with that, didactic kind of talking at them, wanting to defend myself and the importance of my position, and then thought, oh my God, you're not practicing what you preach, and really had to do that backflip to get grounded and think, okay, surrender my ego here, surrender my attachment to a particular outcome, and just get curious so we can have a meaningful conversation, right? So,
And that really takes in the emotional maturity for
yeah,
us to know ourselves, to
yeah,
be willing to reflect on, okay,
yeah,
let me look at me.
yeah,
And I think that's a huge step
yeah.
for parents.
Yeah, no, beautiful, beautiful template. And I saw something in your book. You talk about a high touch method. Can you tell us what is that for our listeners? What does it do? How do we use it?
Yeah, one of the ways of winning loyalty, I talk about 4 or 5 different ways of okay, Richard, how do I win the loyalty of my
Yeah.
children? Well, one of them I call high touch versus high tech. It's very simple. Nothing wrong with a text message. We all do that. Nothing wrong with an email. We all do that. but it's something different when you sit down and handwrite a letter.
Mm,
You handwrite it out. We've all had that. You've received a
yeah,
card that was handwritten note, and you say, "Oh wow, that took an extra step because the card already says something cool, but they
yeah.
took an extra time to write you something personal." And so when you do that and you stick that in the helmet of your son, the ballerina shoes, the guitar, whatever
Mhm.
it is your kids are into,
Yeah.
and they find that handwritten note from you, and it doesn't have to be long. It could be, just a short one. It could be long. This
Yeah.
depends. What was the saying? Sorry for the long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. You know that that
Yeah.
thing. But it's just that's all. High touch is that handwritten note,
Oh,
and that says something about my importance, your importance to me, because I'm sitting down and thinking, what do I want to say here?
yeah. Yeah.
That's what I mean by high
Oh,
touch.
I love that. Oh, you're making me tear up here because I did that when the kids were young, and I never even made that connection until you just said that right now, Richard, because I it's coming back. Like recently and over the last bit, both of my boys, which is unusual, I would say, have written me, cards or just left notes for me with heartfelt, like I don't say it often enough, but blah blah blah. And that's the kind of loyalty relationship building that you get by taking those steps earlier and sort of training that and modeling that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love
And when you received that, wasn't it way different than receiving a
Oh,
text?
oh my God. It just my heart melted, right? It was yeah, no, profound difference. You're right. And it's such a simple thing. And we don't do it often enough in today's high tech society. So that's beautiful advice. Right? And for our listeners, I mean, make a note of that. Like just do that today. I mean, I
Go
invite
do
all
it.
of you
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
right.
do it today, right? So now what advice do you have for parents? Like some of our listeners may be going, geesh, I am in a really strained relationship with my kid or kids right now. What advice do you have for them? I assume it's never too late to start taking those steps to fix it. What would you say to those parents?
It's never too late, but that's the role, what I call, remember, we talked about the role of the gardener,
Yeah.
role of the trainer, the role of
Yeah.
the coach, but this is specific to that question is the role of the farmer.
Mm,
Now you're in the farming mode. Now, what do farmers do? Well, number one, farming is hard work. And number two, no farmer expects a harvest overnight. So
hmm,
that's what you got to understand that. And I've been through this myself.
yeah.
So this could take a month, it could take a year, it could take years. As in my case, it took years.
Yeah.
So what do farmers do? They plow. They
Yeah.
plant, they water, they cultivate. So I say the plowing is the confrontation. Don't give up. That's where you saying, I know we talked about this before, but you're coming home late again. We've talked about this, and you're confronting the behavior that you're not accepting
Yeah.
because it's so easy to ignore it, look away. I don't want to deal with
Yeah.
it anymore. And that's easy to do. And I've
Yeah.
done it myself where I just said, you know what, I don't want to deal with this right now. But
Yeah.
but for the most part, the plowing, you're dealing with their heart, you're dealing with their conscience, so that in their conscience, they know mom is upset, dad's upset,
Yeah.
they're not accepting. The planting is what I call the seeds. We plant seeds, and those are our words. And
Yeah.
so I'm teaching, we have to learn how to say a negative thing in a positive way. Now,
Yeah.
it took me a while to learn this
That's good. Yeah.
because I was shaming. This was one of my stepson was shaming them, and he was really giving us a hard time.
Yeah.
But I learned to say, I believe in you, but
Yeah.
I don't accept your behavior.
Yeah.
I'm for you, but I'm not for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're better than this. That's not who you are. That's not the real you. And I was planting seeds. I was
Yeah.
confronting, but I was planting seeds that, no, I love you, but I
Yeah.
love you too much to leave you this way, and saying things like that. So those are the seeds we plant.
Yeah.
The water, we have to water as farmers. I call that affirmation. When anytime you catch your son who or daughter, maybe they're doing things or they've left the house or whatever it is, anytime you can catch them doing something right, they
Yeah.
took out the trash, they cleaned their room, they came home onto whatever it is, you just say, hey, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for cleaning your room. Thanks for listening to mom, whatever it is. So that's an affirmation. And then the cultivation is what I call the affection.
Yeah.
and physical affection. Anytime, could be birthday, Christmas, holiday, or any time. And this is hard to do, especially when you're having a head-butting type
Yeah.
relationship. But again, this goes back to emotional maturity.
Yeah.
And what do I want?
Yeah.
Give them affection, even if it's a hey, good job, or hey,
Yeah.
high five,
Yeah.
or a hug. Let me come on, let me give you a hug. It's your birthday.
Yeah.
Those, if that, I call that the role of the farmer. And over time, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
Over time, if we're consistent with that, the law of the harvest is on your side,
Oh,
because you are plowing, planting, watering, and cultivating positive things in a negative situation, but you're going to reap what you sowed.
yeah.
I can speak from experience. For us, it was 10 years, but today that relationship is, I would say, it's completely turned around
That's
and doing
awesome.
well.
Yeah.
And it was hard work, a lot of tears,
Yes.
but
I hear
and
you.
a lot of blowing it and not doing well with it,
Yeah.
but consistent over time,
Yeah.
practicing these things I just said, we've reaped the harvest.
Oh, and what a great metaphor. All your metaphors are great, by the way. That farming, that is a beautiful metaphor that works so
Thank you.
beautifully. And the thing I love about your systems is like these are simple things. And not saying it's going to be easy to apply. I mean, you'll have, as you say, those obstacles and struggles, but sticking with these simple principles to be able
Right.
to turn that tide is such a beautiful thing. And and I really love the message you gave as well about how to say negative things, but with that positive spin. What a game changer that is. But also, I wanted to, for our listeners, really put a pin in when you said about even when you don't feel like it. It's about making, we live in such a busy world where everybody's always with make work projects. And I can't think of the times when it has made a profound difference. If your kid is coming to you and they're wanting to talk about something and that door is open, drop what you take that window, take
Right.
take that
That's
window
right.
when it's present, not yeah. So great advice. Now, what's
Yeah.
one of the most surprising things that you discovered while researching for your book, would you say?
Oh, that's a good question. Surprising thing. I'm not sure. I'd have to think
Okay.
about that one. I'm
No,
not
that's
sure.
fair. Well, if it comes to you, you can say, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, you got me stumped on that one. I'm not sure.
I know.
It's well, so much of it has just been my experience,
Yeah,
my personal experience, and then working with all these families
yeah,
for many years. And then I've been mentoring parents and teaching parents for so long. I think I could say this, one of the surprises, not in my research,
yeah,
but in the outcomes of Parents on a Mission, parents that go through the courses,
yeah.
is they say, like for one parent told me, Richard, I never realized it was wrong for me to slap my daughter across the face as as discipline.
Yeah.
And I'm just like how, that was like a surprise to you? Like
Yeah.
that's to me, that's like she was like, I never thought about it. And wow, things like that that people come away with and say, I never thought about it that way. I never saw it that way. So
Yeah.
that's not really research, but that's just my experience.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like I think a lot of your surprises are probably the things that came before that caused you to go down this path in the first place, it sounds like,
That's
which
right.
is kind of beautiful. I love
That's
that.
right.
And what would, do you have any non-negotiable habits that you would suggest for our listeners? Things that like every day, that are there things that you say, these are non-negotiables for me. I do these every day.
Well, for me, I mean, I read every day, something
Nice.
encouraging or something uplifting, something spiritual, something, in other words, I'm working on myself. And that goes back to my personal growth. I have to continually work on myself, not take it for granted. Personal growth or emotional maturity is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
And I want to perform at peak potential. And like, for example, if the best in the world athletes have a coach, I
Yeah.
need a coach,
I
somebody
agree.
like you to coach and talk to me and give me perspective. In
Yeah.
other words, that's not non-negotiable for me. A non-negotiable for me is things that to violate my integrity.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna compromise my integrity. And sometimes that's unpopular. It could
Yeah.
be unpopular with friends, family,
Yeah.
even my kids. But it's like, listen, I'm no, that's a value that I'm not going to compromise. I know it's not popular, but this is who I am, love me or don't like
Yeah.
me.
They're
you
pretty
know,
powerful non-negotiables. I love all of those. And that growth thing, you were so right when you said earlier, and again, for our listeners, like not to, well, I am going to hammer that point home because I do think we reach a certain level, as you say, where we just kind of plateau and flatline, I think was the word you used, which I love. We are, if we're not growing, we're dying, right? Like we need to constantly be, no matter what stage or age, just always be looking for new experiences, new opportunity, new growth
right.
opportunities and models. I think that's so important and so overlooked. Well, Richard, this has been a fabulous, I could talk to you all day about this. You've got such great insights, and I'm sorry our time is coming to an end. And I normally like to end by asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be around parenting, just one of those things that makes you go, ah, and look at life differently or how you show up differently.
The more I know I don't know.
That is so true. And that you talk about humility, it's a tough thing to admit, but boy, is it a powerhouse when we do. That's so good. So where can people learn more about you, Richard? Tell them where they, and we'll make sure to put these in the show notes, but for people who want to grab it right now, where can they learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, they can go to parentsonamission.org. That's my website. And if they want the book, it's on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. And again, we'll make sure to put that in our show notes. And Richard, thank you. We will definitely have to have you come back sometime if you'd like, because I think we barely scratched the surface of some of what you do, and it's a really important issue. It is a life-changing mission, not just for the parents, but for generations of kids to come and the legacy and the world that we're sort of leaving to them. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners out there, this has been a great episode. I really invite you to make sure to give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with the people in your life so that they can get the benefit. We've had the benefit of some really great insights here today, some great theories and perspectives that would be absolute game changers in how you show up in your parenting and in your life as well, to live into the best version of you and allow your kids to live into the best version of them. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And before we sign off, just want to share, as always, a few ways we can work together if you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills so you can negotiate your best life. I've got everything from online to group to signature, mastermind, and VIP experiences available so you can better leverage your innate natural power. And yes, you have it, so that you can get more of what you want and deserve in life, and also inspire those around you to live into their best life. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book, Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that yet. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.